Salam, everyone. My name is Omar Ammari, and today I'm honored to be joined by a very special guest, Nada Elawdan. She is a licensed mental health counselor based in the New York and New Jersey area and the founder of Khair Therapy. Nada, thank you so much for joining me today.
Sure, I'm happy to be here.
To start off, I just wanted to get a background on you. I wanted to give you the opportunity to share more about yourself, including why you decided to become a therapist and your journey up to this point.
Sure, sure. Yeah, so it was a pretty interesting journey. So I pursued therapy and I started to become interested in therapy when I was 16, when I took a psychology class. I was actually on track to be a fashion designer. And I did a complete big career pivot when I was a teenager. And I just really loved psychology. I really loved talking and to getting to know people. I loved movies, so I really loved stories and understanding people's pasts and why they do the things they do in movies or in real life or in books. So I pursued psychology first, and then I got my master's in psychological counseling and mental health counseling. And then I jumped around a couple jobs post grad to get my experience, and then I started hair in the new year.
The new year. And what's your ethnic background for people who
Uh,
may not know?
yeah, I'm Egyptian American. So Egyptian.
Egyptian American. Okay. So I wanted to ask, because I mean, a lot of other backgrounds are very similar, but as an Egyptian American, how has your cultural background affected your path as a therapist? Like how did it affect, like, was there any pushback from family members? Was there any like stigmas you had to overcome?
Not really. I think my mom was always very open no matter what I pursued. My dad doesn't understand the concept of therapy. I think he thinks I'm still a psychiatrist. So it's the idea of therapy he doesn't understand yet, but it's becoming more and more common in Egypt. A couple shows are featuring therapists, a couple movies are nowadays. Like the last like Ramadan series, I think there was a couple therapists that popped in there. So it's becoming more normalized there. But so
That's
far, no
good.
pushback.
No, I'm very glad to hear that. It's good to hear that more parents are being open-minded with what their kids are choosing to do. It's funny that your dad, does he just think that psychiatrists are the only professionals in that field? Is he not aware that there's other professionals?
I just think they're all the same for him.
They're just grouped together.
Mental health, so he puts it all together.
Okay. No, that's fair. And you mentioned that you got into at 16 in high school.
Yeah.
That's very interesting because a lot of high schools don't offer like psych classes. At least in my high school, there wasn't a psychology class. So that's awesome to hear that you went to a school that had psych classes where you can like learn about it and get into it at such a young age. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yes. No, I was very blessed to go to that school because I did was an intro to psychology class when I was a junior, and then I took a psych AP class when I was a senior. And then after every class, I would hang out with the teacher and ask so many questions, and she let me borrow the diagnostic manual, so I would always just read it, and I was just really enthralled by it.
And
Even
just a
at that age.
complete 180 in your career choice. So I wanted to ask you, to transition, I would like to
Mhm.
know more about hair therapy. The word hair is deeply rooted in the Arabic language and culture. Why did you choose that word specifically, that name, and how does it reflect the mission behind your practice?
Sure. It's funny. I was like, I've been wanting to start my own practice for a while. And I think I was just driving my car, and I was like, I need to pick a name. I need to pick a name. And then it just popped up. And mostly because I speak to my mom on the phone, I speak to my dad on the phone, and it's such a common word that we all use. And so I was looking at the word and I liked the way that it was spelled and I liked the meaning. And it just felt so tied to my just day-to-day language with people. And it's so integrated in the way that I practice therapy. And so it just meshed really well. My friends were like, I don't know. And then after a while, they were like, actually, that is so you. And that name is so, I guess, representative of what my mission statement is.
Yeah, for people who don't know what hair means, what does it mean in, I guess, your dialect? Because I'm assuming you speak the Egyptian dialect. And so
Yes.
I'm sure it's similar for all of them, but for you, what
Yeah.
does it mean?
So, I mean, I always refer to it as goodness or blessing.
Yes.
If you search it, it's like well-being and
Yes.
prosperity. I attached the well-being part in there too because I thought that was also like a nice tie to it, especially when it comes to therapy.
No, it's a very well-fitting name for, I mean, a therapy practice. Do a lot of people like mispronounce it, call it like care or
Yeah, I can usually tell when someone's like Middle Eastern or Arab on the phone if we're doing a phone consultation when they pronounce
yeah.
it correctly, but it's fine. It's fine. They're very open to it.
Yeah, no, so your practice, to talk, speak more on it. The blending of like Eastern and Western philosophies is such a beautiful and powerful thing. How do you integrate those two worlds in your therapeutic approaches when you're like approaching an Arabic patient or like an Arab American patient specifically?
Sure, sure. So I've noticed I was looking at my demographic of my clients at the private practice, and it's mostly Arab, but also South Asian, and a lot of just people of color, women of color specifically. And I think there isn't enough women of color in the therapy space that are showing up in the therapeutic work and bringing their own personal perspective. I I chose to blend the East and West because I think that's the only way that we can have well-being. If we focus too much on the Western perspective, it's too individual focused, and it becomes very solitude and very lonely, and no one really grows in loneliness. But then also too much of the collective end, it becomes too self-sacrificial, and then we lose ties of who we are in the midst of what everybody else is doing around us. So I think East and West healing is connecting to your roots, understanding who you are and where you come from. It is acknowledging that we function within an ecosystem. We're not individual people who are just going through the world without a past or without our genetics or without our identity. And our identity ties to so much of how we view the world. So we have to acknowledge it. We can't ignore it. So the Eastern part also pulls in a lot of our deeply rooted ancestral experiences and healing and also trauma, but also ways of connecting with other people.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing the nuances of each side. They are pretty different, and it can be a sensitive thing to mash them together, but it's
Yeah.
something that needs to be done in order to effectively treat people who have similar backgrounds in both sides. A lot of Arab Americans, a lot of Arab who come here. And I wanted to ask you, you said you deal with a lot of women of color. Do you specifically treat women or do you have some male clients? It's a mix,
It's a
even
mix.
bag,
It's a
let's
mix.
say.
It's two-thirds women, one-third men. It just depends on what people are looking for in therapy. A
Yeah.
lot of times they just, people like to go with people who have similar backgrounds or similar life experiences, or I guess what mission statement draws to them. But it just
Yeah,
depends.
no. 100%. And you said how people will typically go for people who have a similar, like a therapist, they'll pick a therapist based on their background, but they'll also pick a therapist based on what they specialize in. And I know that you specialize in specifically identity, perfectionism, burnout, and self-worth. So I wanted to ask you, why did you pick those issues to specialize in, and why do you think these issues resonate so deeply in our community, like specifically the Arab American community?
Sure, sure. So when I was first practicing, I didn't know what I was naturally gravitating towards. I think it's just the themes that you notice that people come up in and they come up in therapy and sessions, but also where your own special interests start naturally gravitating towards, even just looking at the books that you're reading or the topics that you're talking about. You could have like one client and go to 10 therapists and they'll all talk about different things and point out the different things based on what they're interested in or what their specialties are. So for me, just over time, identity and perfectionism seems to be very big when it comes to just exploring a person's sense of self. And all of that ties to self-worth. They're all connected. It's all a web that I explained to my.
Yeah,
And then
no,
when it
it's
comes to the Arab American community,
yes,
I mean, there's a lot of layers to it. There is something of needing to feel successful. There's a need to feel protected. There's a need to feel also seen and understood. And a lot of this stuff tackles that a sense of self-worth and belonging. And so the thing is, we are in a way grew up to be a perfectionist. And
yeah,
the all or nothing when it comes to school or when it comes to religion or when it comes to culture, when it comes to being, close to family connections. So that is ingrained within a lot of us that we have to be able to understand, not unlearn, but how to use it positively as opposed to letting it control us.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting that it's something that just came over time. I was under the impression that you just specialize in what you like, but it's something that you just developed over time based on the patients that you were dealing with. And I like how you tied in what you specialize in with the Arab American community. I think a lot of Arabs focus on perfectionism and they expect it from their kids, and there's a lot of, stress that can come from that. Specifically, when it comes to mental health and identity, I think a lot of people will stray away from seeking out treatment because they don't want to be labeled or seen as crazy. Like there's a lot of that's identification and self-worth that you mentioned. When it comes to the Arab identity, you don't want to be seen as weak or someone that needs therapy. They don't want to pass that on to their future generations because they think it's, genetic.
Yeah.
So, do you encounter that a lot when you're dealing with Arab patients?
Not with my patients specifically, but I do know that is just a conversation that's just generally have, mostly because it comes out of fear. And that's something I think we could hold space for, that parents, let's just say in the general sense of it, I know it's not one size fits all with this narrative, but if we use the narrative of parents sacrificing so much to come here, and then suddenly the guilt if their child does not know how to survive or assimilate or make it in the country, and they're struggling with mental health for many different reasons. It could be chemical, it could be environmental, it could be stress, it could be trauma, and they don't want to feel like they're responsible for their child going through this, and it becomes such a stigma that I did a bad job or I'm a bad parent, my child is like this, when that's not really ever the case. um, Parents do have some say when it comes to mental health. I'm not going to say that it's completely separate, but it's providing a little bit of grace and forgiveness that a lot of times in therapy, we just talk about what's going on in someone's day to day and develop coping skills. We don't judge parents.
So, are you saying that you see a lot of parents who deal with the stress of raising their kids and feeling like they didn't do a good job, or I see. No, I can see that a lot of parents could probably go through something, especially if their kids choose to do something else or they feel like failures. I hear that a lot, like, because a lot of times you'll see like the mothers, they'll take care of their kids and they'll take care of their kids' friends and all that. But you always have to wonder how they're doing. A lot of times I feel like we just overthink our parents and the stress that they go through just raising us, especially if we're first generation or second generation. So it's really awesome that you bring that to light.
Thank you. Yeah, we have to look a couple generations back and put
Yeah.
our perspective in our parents. We don't necessarily, well, we can't necessarily put a blanket statement of what every parent's experience looks like. But it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure leaving home, leaving everything that you know, leaving your culture, leaving your language, leaving your family, sometimes by choice for a better life, or sometimes you have to because of, war or famine or political instability. And that within itself also causes a trauma wound that's it's not as though that's not going to affect the child. So it's
Yeah.
providing some grace for the parents as well, that they're just trying.
Yeah, and I think that's more apparent than ever now, what you mentioned with people getting relocated and moving over here. I think the amount of Arabs coming to the US now is greatly increased more than ever. And that's why I think mental health needs to be addressed more than ever within the Arab community. I think it's something that needs to be pushed and something that needs to be accepted and encouraged. And that's what people like you do. I mean, you have your practice, but you also, in addition to your clinical work, you also create educational content online. Um, I want to ask you, what inspired you to use your voice and use it on a broader platform to educate people?
So my social media is actually very funny. So at first I was just making general videos here and there. And then I guess everything kind of my mission statement has changed. I guess since October 7th, in the way that I address mental health and the way that I address the Arab community. Ironically, I was looking at my demographics. I only have 3% of my followers are from the US. So I actually don't have a big Arab American community on there. It's mostly actually Egyptians and Jordanians. So that's actually most of my population goes to. So I also did a slight pivot in the way that I address certain topics, and it became more about just providing mental health information, support, um, having that open dialogue that maybe people don't feel comfortable having, especially from someone who's a similar background or, similar, maybe, I don't know, family structures, or, it could be someone's cousin, it could be someone's sister. So I try to keep it as approachable as possible because also at the same time, what am I trying to say? Hold on. I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to say here.
Mhm.
I try to, It's a very hard topic for me to talk about the social media. I don't know why. I just think it's so hard to explain.
Can I ask, did you get into it with the intention of getting to where you are now with it? Like, did you start with the same like the idea of what it is now, like with the content that you create, the content that you share?
I'm gonna pivot, I think, a little bit of the content that I'm making because honestly, the way that okay, so this is what I wanted to say. I was talking about it with my cousins because I didn't know what direction I wanted to go in. And a
Yeah.
lot of them suggested just making mental health content for Egyptians because not all of them have access to that resource. And it's also exercising my own privilege and being able to have a really great education and have really great resources and people and mentors around me that I want to move that forward. I don't want to gatekeep information. So my whole mission statement is not to gatekeep information. It's try to make it as approachable, as accessible, and as understandable as possible for as many people as possible. And I even have my cousin do the translations for me to make it as understandable as possible for people there.
No,
So that's
that's really
what I was trying to say.
no, that's really cool. So you've adapted it based on the people that follow you.
Yes.
Basically, yeah. Because you create content, obviously you're in the America, but that's actually surprising that a large portion of your viewers are from the Middle East. I mean specifically Egypt, but
80% Egypt and 10% Jordan, which is a very funny split.
yeah,
And
because
a little
your
bit
con
percentages here and there, but then mostly not like a very American audience.
no, but that's I mean that's great that you're reaching a population like that, that you're reaching out into the Middle East, not even being in the Middle East and
Yeah.
not having your content in Arabic. You said just translations, but
Yeah.
you speak in English. No,
I
that's
know.
really
I
cool.
know. It's
It's very fascinating how that works, but you adapted and you overcame and you now create content to cater to those people, your own people.
yes.
Yeah. So because you've worked with Arab Americans and because you create content for Arabs in general, I wanted to ask you, what are the biggest lessons you've learned from working with in the community? I don't know how long have you been in practice for, and what are the lessons that you've learned? Because you seem very young.
I know. Let's see. I've been practicing since grad school through my internships. I finished grad school in 2020, and then I've just been practicing at private practices, couple private practices post grad until I
Yeah.
started.
So
So
you are very young. You can do this for however long you want to, but I'm sure you've learned a lot within that, what, 5 years?
yeah, I think even in just the last year and a half, I've actually grown so much professionally. I think the biggest thing that I've learned when it comes to just the way that I approach Arab Americans, there is something of just, I think, acknowledging that so many things can be true at the same time and to also just hold space. And the biggest piece of advice I would tell people is just to give themselves some grace because we're all very hard on ourselves and we all want to figure it out. But also, this is a very weird time that we're in. It's a very hard time that we're in. It's a very confusing time that we're in. So, the biggest thing that I would say to do is first hold some space and grace for what we're going through and not to judge yourself too hard. But also, I think in moments of feeling disconnected from the world, I think it's important to reconnect to yourself and your culture. That's why I ask a lot of questions about where people are from and what they family traditions and family food and music. There is something with the body remembers. So there is something of pulling yourself back into where your culture is from that makes you feel very grounded when you're physically feeling uncomfortable or displaced, or the environment is not congruent to your genetics and your biology. So it is really taking care of yourself and validating and connecting with others and knowing where you come from and who you are. And also, I think it's acknowledging the multiple identities that we're holding.
Yeah.
So the thing is, we're not going to be fully Arab, we're not going to be fully American. It's how to hold space that we're going to be a very different version of both. And that within itself is its own identity that we have so much flexibility in creating.
Yeah, no, a lot of Arab Americans, like you said, a lot of Arabs are very hard on themselves, and it can be hard assimilating into a culture that's very different from your own. I mean, I'm very fortunate to have grown up in the US, but that comes with its own nuances. I was very disconnected from my community until I was in college, and that's when I was like, wow, like being Arab is so much different from what I expected because I was in a very predominantly white community. So I didn't know anything about what it meant to be Arab outside of, my own small family. So finally learning more about my culture and becoming, more intertwined with my roots and my identity, the music, the language, the food, the traditions, everything. It was very hard trying, like accepting that it's so different. And then realizing that there's a lot of other that come here that are like just culture shocked by how different this country is. And a lot of them come here unwillingly because of all the violence that's going on. And I can imagine how much stress that causes them. But it's okay. It's important, like you said, to understand that they are very different. And the US, you shouldn't let it rob you of your identity. I think that's why I always encourage people. I encourage myself and people around me, Arabs, to attend like events where there's like other Arab, or like go to like cultural shows or events, or like do like communities service with
Yeah.
your like church group or your mosque group or whatever you practice, in order to just stay in touch with your culture, stay in touch with your identity.
Yes. And also share with other people who are pretty going something similar. As soon as we realize that we're not alone in all of this and that we have other people either similar or dissimilar to us, it develops that, once again, that kind of community healing. And the kind of, I mean, culture within itself is, more Eastern focus. So that's bringing the Eastern healing into it, but
Yeah,
also making sure
no.
that we don't neglect ourselves as individuals. So what are we able to do? Acknowledging that, okay, if we feel lonely, what are we able to do? If we're feeling sad, what are we able to do? If we're feeling nervous, what are we able to do? It's being able to hold so many ways of healing together,
No.
especially when you're feeling so disconnected at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's important to know you're not alone. And I think as an Arab, it's nice to have the community. I mean, Arabs are very family focused, so having a community that you can lean on, the support group is very nice to have. But obviously, for more like chronic illnesses, chronic mental health disorders, it's nice to have treatment options, it's nice to have therapy, and it's also good that you promote those things and that you do that through your content. You are a mental health provider, so
Yes. It's the more ways of healing that we're able to introduce, the better that things are. It's not a
yeah.
one size fits all. It's not just one thing. It's the many different things that we're able to do together.
Yeah, having multiple options, exactly. So this has been such an insightful experience to talk to you and learn more about you and your practice. Before we wrap up, is there any final message you'd want to share with someone who may be struggling silently or is unsure of whether therapy is for them?
Sure, sure. So, what I would say to the people who are struggling silently, I know a lot of people do say it, but you're not alone in this. Sometimes it could feel very lonely, or sometimes we're physically feeling alone or mentally feeling alone. but there's going to be someone out there who understands, who's been through something similar. It is just a matter of finding those people, or honestly, finding it within yourself. We can't always depend on other people to be our savior. So sometimes we have to be able to be consistently there for ourselves and develop that close relationship with ourselves. So really knowing who you are, what you stand for, what your beliefs are, what your values are, where you come from, all of these ways to feel more grounded in who you are and your identity in this world and yourself in this world. And you can have bad days, but it doesn't mean that you have a bad life.
Yeah. What about what about someone who's hesitant about going to therapy?
What I will say is that I think therapy, it's just a matter of, they what do they say? Therapy is like dating. You have to try out a
Yeah.
couple of therapists and give it a shot. You may not mesh well the first time because a lot of times the first time is just information collecting and intakes. But over time, as you get to know the person, if you think it's a good fit, if they are multiculturally competent and they know how to speak they understand what you're trying to say and they feel like you can connect and you feel understood, that within itself is healing. It's not
Yeah.
always just psychology, it's feeling seen and understood by another human being.
I love the way that you put it. I've always known like how to put it, but the way you put it is perfect. It's like dating.
Yeah.
It's like you have to find the right person and you can try different therapists. Not everyone's gonna match, not everyone's gonna go well together. But once you find the right one, it's a great experience therapy. You create a safe place for this person to just let their stressors out.
Yeah.
And
I don't have the best fit for every single person.
yeah.
There's also people who have came along with me through my different jobs and into care because we just connected really well. And that within itself, connection is also a blessing.
Yeah, and then you said how it's just having some sort of support, even if it's not therapy, having maybe a friend, having going to a support group, just having something that you can lean on. Because, like you said, it is cliche, but no one's alone in this. Everyone has someone that they can lean on, and if you don't, you can find someone.
Yes, I think the biggest thing when it comes to healing is connection and feeling understood and seen by others. A lot of times, a lot of struggles with mental health is just feeling misunderstood by a partner, not feeling seen by your parents, not feeling that you could connect with other people around you. But once you have that need met, you'll be so surprised where your confidence goes, where your happiness comes from, where your sense of direction goes. Having people around you influences you, motivates you, inspires you and makes you feel like, hey, I'm a person on Earth. I'm not just a ghost floating by because someone sees me.
Oh, no, that's a beautiful way to put it. Well, thank you, Nada, for
My
your compassion, your insight, and the essential work that you do. It's so important what you do. And I think that your presence and your practice are a source of inspiration for a lot of people. Um, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you and your practice?
Thank you for the kind words. I really do appreciate
Of
it.
course, of
Um,
course.
I have the same name everywhere. You could find me on Hair Therapy. I've been focusing more on my writing. So if you want to go check out the blog, I've been working a lot on that, and I'm going to go back to filming videos this week. And you could find me on Instagram right there for at Hair Therapy also.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Take care, Nada. All right. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you. I had so much fun doing this.